Okay, we have comments from our town manager, Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, Mayor Clement. I think the agenda this afternoon is pretty straightforward, and we'll address each of the items as they come due on the agenda. I do ask the council for permission to request one additional action item this afternoon. It just came to me in the last hour, actually. But our recreation director has been working on a Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant, and it's for the purpose of eventually funding the trail, what we call the perimeter trail, if you recall, on the Whitehall master plan. And it's the ADA accessible trail, and it will circle, and it also assists with the ongoing efforts to do the controlled burns out there. As it turns out, the part of grant is due May 1st, and he was plugging along very easily and well on being able to make that date, but then came across an item in the packet that required council approval of an application by May 1st, and this, of course, is our only meeting before then. The one commitment that it does involve is that the town will provide matching funds to any grant that is provided. It is a $500,000 grant, which is making a $500,000 commitment. However, what all you are committing to at this point is that we will provide matching funds within 3 years of having been awarded. That will be a lot of time to either set matching funds aside and or leverage other grant funds in order to be able to provide the match. So what we would be asking for this afternoon under action items is simply a motion to approve the application for part of funds for the Whitehall Perimeter Trail.
I'm sorry, who's the application with? Is it a state?
Yes, state agency. It's Parks and Recreation Trust Fund.
Okay.
So it'd be with the state of North Carolina.
Thanks.
Other than that, and I can bring that up again once we get to the action items, I have nothing further at this point, Mayor.
Okay, I'm going to add that to as B under action items, and if you will just make sure that we get the motion correct, let me get to that point.
Certainly.
Okay. All right, so moving on to the first action item, authorize town manager to execute agreement with Weymouth Center for the Arts and Humanities for outgoing loan of artwork, and there was a lease agreement or a first draft of a lease in our packet.
Yes, Mayor, and this is an item we've been working with Katie over at the Weymouth Center on for some time. These are the 3 Wyeth paintings, and you received the lease agreement under separate cover due to some information that is contained therein. But it is a lease that both Attorney McCarley and Attorney Tom Van Camp, on behalf of the Wyeth nonprofit, have both reviewed and are comfortable with the language. And what this would do is take the 3 paintings that the town has ownership of, and it would loan them to the Wyeth, or I'm sorry, not Wyeth, the Weymouth House, the Weymouth Center, where the 3 Wyeths will hang as part of the revolutionary events that will be taking part across not only North Carolina, but the country through January of 2027. So this would run from June of 2025 through January of 2027. There are numerous sections in the lease regarding the required security, the handling of those paintings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The lease itself is built off of a template that Assistant Manager Roth had pulled down from the Smithsonian group, who obviously have a lot of experience in the handling of these types of valuable materials. So what we would ask for this afternoon is simply approval of that lease with the Weymouth Center.
So I don't have a copy of that lease in my packet. You mentioned that you have one.
So I thought it was in the packet. It was actually a separate item in the Dropbox. Do you have a copy of it?
Okay, I just got back in town last night at 8
Okay.
o'clock, so I have not.
Yeah, we did not include it in the packet because of
Okay.
some of the values that are assigned on
Okay.
that and such.
Okay,
When do you need the vote on it?
Because the event does not begin until June, if you're not ready to approve that this afternoon, we could do it at the meeting that will be coming up in, I don't know if it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I haven't pulled the calendar up, but we still have May that you could do it at that point.
Would you prefer that we wait?
that'd be my preference if we could, and I'm certainly supportive of this, but I'd like to take,
Sure.
I don't really want to vote on a contract that I haven't seen, and I apologize I didn't get to email. That's,
Certainly. We'll get a hard copy of that printed for
okay,
your
great,
packet too.
thanks so much, appreciate it.
Okay, so we're going to delay that until our May business meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. And then do you have,
And then item 4B, Greg, is there any specific language in that application packet, or would simply a motion that the town council approves the application for part of funds for purposes of building a perimeter trail at Whitehall be sufficient?
No, there's no specific language. I have to get you to sign it, Taylor. There's a little certification you'll have to do.
Okay.
But aside from that, it's exactly that. Just saying we agree that you can apply for this.
So I make a motion that we support a submission of the grant to the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund on behalf of our own Parks and Recreation crew who are offering this service to provide money to support the grant that would direct resources to the perimeter trail at Whitehall. Oops.
I'm going to second that.
all right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Just
Thank you very much.
Yeah, grab me after the meeting and I'll sign it. Thank you for finding the grant and applying for it. It's always good to look for additional money where it's available. Okay, council updates and discussion. The Arts Council lease, which is in your packet.
May I back up 1 second?
Yes.
And this may not be the venue to bring this up in, but has there been talk of the Wyeth pieces simply being sold to or donated to Weymouth? No.
Not
Is
at
that
this
That's
point.
nothing that we're interested in doing.
There has not been discussion around that. We've had multiple discussions in recent time, one being the item that we're about to discuss in
Right.
in potentially having a permanent location for them after the Arts Council does their expansion there at the Campbell House. There has, I think Weymouth has some interest in potentially talking about that once the celebration about to come up rolls through its course, but there's been no formal determinations or anything of that nature.
Okay. I'd be interested in hearing from both Katie and also Chris Dunn in regard to the Arts Council potentially being in that same situation and being in a position where we honor the Wyeth paintings that we have. I know there's been a history of worrying about caring for them as
Yes.
far as being good stewards of those as a town. And I know that we've had some close calls with, I think, a leaky roof and paintings in the past. So
We do not have real good facilities for
we don't have a
that
great
type of
place
thing.
to
Yeah.
support that. And I think that's a pretty important piece of history that we might want to make available to the town with, just to further confuse things, with a clause in a contract that if either, wherever they end up, if Weymouth or Arts Council, either one, somehow terminated their existence, that it would revert back to the town. But I think we should seriously think about that, because I think at the moment we're not honoring the gift that we have simply because we're not able to. So I wanted to throw that one, wanted to really confuse things.
Well,
I would say let's.
come this time next month, they will have a home for the next
Right, and I think that's exciting.
year. So
I also think a long-term solution might be a good thing. If with the permanent gift or whatever people decided to do, if with that went the liability as far as insurance and the people undertaking that, were able to provide that security.
Yep.
And if there was a reversion back to the town, should there be a reason that they no longer wanted it, I think that would be a responsible thing to do with the art. And I don't know, I don't think I've ever seen the Wyeths.
I would say let's move forward with our
Yeah,
short-term.
I agree,
leasing.
but I wanted to plant that seed.
yeah.
I think it's,
As the end of 2026 approaches and their lease is coming up, we can decide long-term what makes the most sense for those pieces.
yeah. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
if I may, Mayor, I'll invite Ray and Chris to join us. Just as a reminder, this item was before you last year, and we sort of held off on it due to a number of factors. At the time, we were kicking around what to do with some town offices. There was questions around whether we'd be able to maybe move recreation out of the Campbell House. Of course, at this point in time, we have not moved forward with either improvement plans for the administration building, the finance office across the street. And there's no immediate future for a different home for Parks and Recreation at this time. So that one is a little bit behind us. We also went back and between myself and Chris, and I think Ray was involved, and Mac, and I think Emily Tobias, and a number of us, and looked at some questions at the time around could the Campbell House be sold, or what sort of the options were around some of that, and Mac's prepared to kind of address the findings on that. To kind of cut to the end of the story, there aren't a lot of limitations that there may have been at one time. So other than that, you'll recall that our conversation was around an interest on behalf of the Arts Council to get some form of long-term lease that provided them some level of assurance, because they are in the process of now fundraising for a pretty significant addition to the rear corner of the Campbell House that will provide both an elevator, ADA accessibility to the second floor, and ultimately additional gallery and event space for them to be able to operate their programs. We talked around the concept of buyout clauses, very similar to what the town had done with the Boys and Girls Club on the Recreation Center a number of years ago after they made an investment in creating the Teen Center addition there. And also, again, the question around whether the Arts Council may one day be able to own the Campbell House if all parties involved did in fact have some interest. The other small item in that initial draft lease was around the financial responsibility on repairs. That's currently capped at $100, which is at this point very much an outdated figure. I think all parties agree. So we can talk a little bit about where council would like to set that. $25,000, $30,000 sounds good to me, but and I say that because, well, HVAC systems are expensive, and it's what the town keeps getting caught with in a lot of these leases. But it was really just to get Chris and Ray back in front of the council, maybe provide a couple of updates on where their program and exciting plan have sort of evolved to and where they stand, and then to ask council if there are considerations or additions we need to get back into this draft lease to maybe be able to get something finalized so that they can finalize some of their fundraising. With that, if you have questions of me, or I can turn it over to Chris to provide a little bit of an update.
So the lease agreement that's in our packet is from 2016. Is that
Yes.
the most recent?
That is the most recent. It is.
And it says 5 years, so it would have terminated April 13th of 2021. Unless you go by the date in item, or in 7, which says during the 2-year period of this lease. Either way, it's,
And that may be a carryover from something too,
Okay.
but no, I think the 2021 date was the expiration. Again, it's not a lease that there's currently any money attached to. 2021, we were in the middle of COVID, and this was not the highest priority, obviously. And they've always been good tenants, and I'm not aware of anybody looking to get them out of there, so.
and I had questions for Attorney McCarley on if we sign another lease, whether it be a 5-year, 10 or 20-year lease, and then for some reason the town decides that disposing of this property makes the most sense, does the lease carry forward with whoever the next owner is?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Chris, Ray, thank you for joining us today. Would you guys like to, I guess, speak or update
Yeah.
us on where your fundraising goals are?
Yeah, I can tell you what we've done since our last meeting. Actually, since February, we've raised a little over $900,000 of our $3.5 million goal.
great.
We've also completed phase 1 of the landscape management plan by Glenn Bradley, which is the area just around the Campbell House, where he's working on phase 2 now. We also received town approval for the architectural compliance permit. That was last month. And our next step is to submit the plans, site plan and building plans for those to be approved, hopefully by July 1st. That's our timetable with the architect and the engineers. And then right after that approval, once we get that, we will submit or invite contractors to submit bids on the project. And our goal is to raise $1 million of construction costs or funds by the end of this year. And with that in hand, we feel confident that First Bank will help us with a bridge loan to get us started if we need it. That's only if we need it. So that we can break ground by this time next year or at least by 2027.
So you said you're $900,000 in. So when you say you're looking for $1 million this year,
$1 million in construction costs.
Okay, different.
Yeah, right now we have about $600,000 in construction, $200,000 in endowment, and the rest in landscaping.
okay.
I think I did that right.
You did.
Okay, good.
That
It
would be an
changes
additional
daily, which is
million.
great.
That would be
Yeah.
an additional million on top of the 900,000 you're currently holding.
Say that again?
That would be an additional million on top of the 900,000.
No, it'll
Simply
be
the
getting
difference
us
between the 600 and the
600, we have $400,000
$400,000
more to raise
right,
by the end of this year.
Right.
And that fundraising's really been since the 1st of February, and it's only come from, out of our 1,000 households, it's come from about 23 people, so it's going really well.
Yeah.
That's
been
amazing.
surprised
Congratulations,
by
yeah.
how well
That's
it's done.
fabulous.
One thing I would add, if I might,
Go for it.
you're going to see this in the plans. We actually are designing a small historical gallery in this addition. It'll be the connector between the old part of the house and the new gallery. And it is our intent to have that be a place where potentially the Wyeth paintings could be housed, open to the public for free, of course, and then other historic pieces of art significant to the community that we would have there.
And are you all comfortable with increasing the out-of-pocket repair expenses that's on the,
At 30,000, maybe not a month or.
but you're okay with
otherwise
it
every-
going up?
Oh, yeah, I understand that fully. And also to let you know, the $3.5 million, half of that is our endowment, so that we know there's going to be a financial responsibility once this is open that we will have to take over. So yeah, we fully understand that that has to go up. And it's basically on occurrence if something happens. We don't call y'all if it's $101.
Yeah.
That's what we try not to do that. But there's not many things that's $100 or less anymore.
Do you have a proposal on what might be an appropriate amount for the?
I know what's in the lease agreement that's just a draft was $250. I don't even know if that's appropriate. And I think we've spoken anywhere from $250 to $1,000. That's the numbers that have been thrown around.
The most, obviously, the most breathing room the council could give us, the better, because it is a big lift for our Arts Council to raise this money. And then what we're seeing by building the endowment and other resources, we'll be better positioned in a few years to be able to do more.
And I might make the suggestion if council's kind of debating within that 250 to 1,000 range, given the intent with the endowment and some of the discussion that has taken place around maybe long-term transferal of the property or something, it may be such that if you're going to go into, for instance, a 30-year agreement, that you could set it at $500 for the first, pick 5 years, 10 years, to $750 for the next, to $1,000. I mean, you could certainly graduate that through the lease.
Is your recommendation a 30-year lease?
I believe it was 30 years that we talked about back last year when we talked about this. Yeah, I think they were looking for a minimum, if I recall, and correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think they were looking for a minimum of 20 to be able to help with their fundraising and
Right,
such. And I
sure.
think we talked about 30 as being a good figure.
So being that we're missing two of our council members, we do have the ability to vote on this tonight. Do you all want to discuss it and table it.
Yeah, and there really isn't an agreement before you to vote on. It's more,
Discussion.
what would you like to see worked into kind of the working draft so that we can get something back in front of you in relative short order for further consideration.
I mean, I think I'm more comfortable with $1,000. That way it's closer to what the Boys and Girls Club has. I mean, it's so substantially below other properties that we're leasing out. And if we look at a 20-year lease, it goes up after 10 years. $1,000 just doesn't, it's not going to be worth that much in 10 years. I hate to say that.
So I need to hear from our esteemed attorney regarding, there's an existing building that we own. They're about to pay for an addition that will attach to the existing building that we own. Just talk me through, let me wrap my head around that, because they're putting a lot on the line
It's the same thing the Boys and Girls Club did with the back.
to improve, they're putting a lot on the line to improve our property. They're taking a lot of risk, and I would like to protect the Arts Council, but also do the right thing for the town. So help me understand how we protect everybody.
I fully expect that we'll have a new lease that incorporates terms about that construction before it starts.
Okay, so you think that our consideration for a lease right now is more of a lease to show our good faith that we are interested in a long-term relationship with the Arts Council that would assist them with fundraising? Is that true or not true? What is the purpose of a new lease right now that does not incorporate in a building that they've paid well over $1 million for?
I think the purpose is to allow them to convince their donors
Right.
that they have a long-term interest in the property.
Okay.
But it's also to true up any of the other items in the lease that need some.
Right, okay.
And if I may sort of
Please.
add, so purpose twofold. One, they're just not currently under a lease other than just an extension
Right,
of
right.
the old.
A month to month, yes.
Exactly.
I would not be comfortable
So
with that.
two, while we're working that issue out, this issue of they're trying to fundraise to do the addition came up, and the interest in long-term to be able to do that, obviously. And I'm not suggesting it's the ultimate answer, but to give you an idea of how that was dealt with on the Recreation Center Boys and Girls Club. Essentially, there is language in that lease that does a couple of things. One, if the town were to decide to sell that structure, it gives them the first right of refusal on the entirety of it. So they built the teen center, the addition. It is now town property. However, they have the first right of refusal if we decide to sell off the entire asset. Secondly, in the event that they don't exercise that first right of refusal, there is language in that agreement that essentially pays them back for the investment in the addition. And I believe, I'd have to go back and look, but I think that's even on an amortized sort of basis.
Okay,
Uh,
so
but,
it
but
creates
it basically was a way to protect their investment and see that they could get full financial use out of it for a period of time. Yes.
creating a lien on the property that benefits them in the event that they did not want to go forward with a buyout. Got it.
I'll leave whether it's technically a lien or not to the
Right,
attorneys,
right.
but yes.
Understand. But it's an okay.
Yeah.
It's an option, okay.
Yep.
And that's a unilateral decision by the Boys and Girls Club in that case. That is not, the town is not a party to that action, nor are they ones who can call that action onto the table. Is that true? You understand what I'm saying? Can the town say, hey, we've decided to sell it and here's your money based on the amortization?
They have the first right of refusal. So
Right.
if we decide to sell it, the beginning point is negotiating with them what the fair market value of that is and whether they wish to move forward with a
Okay.
purchase or not.
Okay, great.
If I'm hearing right from Mayor Clement, you're thinking of possibly tabling some of the discussion. I guess, Manager Parsons, give me a little bit more clarity on what exactly we need to do right now in terms of moving forward.
Essentially, if there's a strong feeling about for instance, what that $100 becomes. And again, it's not final until you have a lease in front of you and a majority of you agree on a number. But if you have a number you'd like to see in the draft, and whether that's an immediate number, whether it's graduated over the period of the lease, all of those types of things just sort of help with the drafting of the lease. I guess initial knowledge that you're interested in a long-term lease and continuing the relationship with the Arts Council. If there are other things that the lease that's in your packet does not address or that we have not discussed attempting to address, let us know what that is and we'll work on language for it. I know some of this conversation around how to protect both entities and eventual sale. I think we will still want to leave, if we're talking about 20 or 30 years down the road, I think we want to leave a clause in there that addresses the potential that the town, even if we continue to own the building, actually remove all offices from the building. Some of the reasoning behind a $1 lease and some of the shared expenses have a lot to do with the fact that we continue to operate out of the second floor of that building. In the event that were to change, I think the relationship changes a little bit. And one thing I know Chris has also expressed an interest in, and I would absolutely agree with, given the addition that they're doing and how the building lays out, is that if we were to abandon the second floor, that the Arts Council would have the access to that via the lease, and we wouldn't simply abandon it and move a neighbor in or something.
We've already run out of space. We're sharing offices, and 3 of the offices are more storage than offices, so the offices upstairs would be helpful to us, and we could utilize that space. And that's part of the reason why there is an elevator that's giving access to the second floor.
The proposed addition.
In the proposed,
Right, okay.
actually, that one is actually inside the current house.
Inside the current house, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
As part of the project that brings about the addition.
Yeah.
There's also an elevator to the basement, and because of cost, we have to have 2 separate ones. And right now, you can get to the basement, but it's a very steep stairs. It's not safe at all to use.
Okay. Is the
And-
basement dry? Is the basement?
Yes.
It is dry.
And the reason why there are 2 elevators and not 1 is because cost. It costs more for a 3-stop elevator than it does for 2 one-stops.
Go
And
figure.
also getting it approved, because the Campbell House is a historic home, that it's
Right.
in what it is and what it was created as, but in its use, it's a commercial site according to the town UDO. So we're trying to balance the historic nature of the property and the commercial use of it. So we talked to an elevator inspector, and he said you could get this passed a lot easier if it's just 2 elevators going 1 floor each.
Okay, makes sort of sense, right.
I-
I understand.
Don't ask me, I just listen to the experts.
Well, I think, if I recall, there was some challenge in finding a proper location in order to get an elevator shaft in to serve all floors.
Yeah,
You started running into some of the historical things. and-
Yeah, we're trying not to affect the existing structure much at all.
The
But yeah.
handprint of the historic home. Regarding number 5 on the original lease, I don't know if you have,
Yes.
as it relates to the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
Are we specifically talking about the train house? Is
So-
that no longer
And
part?
that's some language in the draft that we've already started to address, because the I won't say the relationship, but their location has changed since that lease was in place.
So we can strike, if we were to go forward with a new contract, we could strike number 5.
You can, but if we were to start to utilize the second floor, a new lease would probably have to address that, because I don't remember anything in the deed restricting. It was always my understanding that there would be a place for the Boy Scouts at Campbell House.
Is that a part of the original deed?
I never saw it in the deeds. The only thing in the deeds that I saw was a restriction for, you could not use the Campbell House. The gift was given to be used for public purposes.
Yeah.
Mr. Campbell was one of the founders of the Boy Scout movement internationally.
Okay.
And it was their wish. And the daughter, Margot Campbell Bogart, also has been a leader of Scouting International, and she remains the leading patron of the Campbell House. So we would always
Okay.
have a place
So you
for
want-
Scouts.
Okay, but you also, that's not specifically referring to the train house, that is any place on the property that you deem appropriate to allow them to meet?
No, for our lease,
I guess let's cut to the chase. How do we leave that in and protect the Arts Council and the,
actually, because their office is now on the second floor, it probably shouldn't be in this lease at all. Does that make
because
sense?
they are currently using property that is under the purview
town.
of the town?
Yeah, we have no control of the second floor.
So for now, what you need is you need a long-term lease that ensures your potential benefactors that we are committed to a long-term relationship with you.
Yeah.
You do not need the Boy Scouts of America to be a part of that because the Boy Scouts of America are covered through the town allowing them to use part of the second floor. Is that
Yeah,
all?
the only thing I might suggest on that is, again, if we get into language about should we leave the second floor to the Arts Council, and there is a desire on both the behalf of council and also certainly the Arts Council, given their benefactors and the history there, that we could certainly write in that in the event we could write something very basic that in the event the town is not in the building, there will be an office made available to the Boy Scouts or something,
Okay.
if it's agreeable to both parties and
Yeah.
sounds.
That'd be fine.
Piece,
I don't
probably.
think it's utilized a whole lot if,
It doesn't currently. They come in maybe 2 or 3 times a year right now.
Okay, so the other question I have is in regard to whatever repair or maintenance of the interior that was agreed upon, would the Arts Council be amenable to language that didn't just say expenses for less than $100, but for the first X number of dollars of the repair in any instance? So for example, when the heat blows out, you guys, if we were at $1,000 or at $500, you would say, we'll pay the first $500.
you're almost saying make it a deductible kind of
Right,
approach.
make it a deductible, because otherwise I can see, oh, can you give us a bid? And not that you would ever do this, but I can see some invitation to game playing unnecessarily. Oh, you gave us a bid for $527. Can you make it $499 so that, I would rather it be a deductible situation. What's Mac? Tell me what I'm saying wrong.
I think the recommendation is good. I think he can probably figure out the wording.
I don't know, Mac has an issue with something, and he's going to be smarter about this than I will be. Let's hear from you, Mac, because I know you have an idea there.
This microphone?
Just come sit with us, yeah.
The manager and I were just discussing whether or not a proportional formula for repairs would make sense. If they're using 2/3 of the building and we're using 1/3, that any repair would be split on a proportional basis. But Mr. Parsons' immediate reaction is that produces much larger numbers for the Arts Council.
I agree with that.
Just as an observation. not a
Right, I agree
complaint.
with that. And I hate to put them in that
Totally
situation
understand.
where the heat blows out and suddenly there's a $30,000 bill that they're responsible for 20,000 of it immediately while trying to raise $3 million. That doesn't seem very kind.
It's not kind, but at least it's proportional and fair.
And I'm not sure that our taxpayers should be responsible for 100% of it either.
Right, I agree with that. I sort of like the deductible idea for now as we move forward. I mean, I understand that we're doing a 20 to 30-year lease, but I also understand that that 20 to 30-year lease is probably going to be updated with another 20 to 30-year lease within the next 3 years as we iron out the ins and outs of their addition to our building at their expense that then ultimately benefits the town as an asset unless and until we find a way to make that fair. Go ahead.
If we sign a long-term lease with them in the near future to advantage their fundraising efforts, the only way that gets changed is if both parties
If
agree
both
to
parties
change it.
consent, I understand that too.
Chris, do you have information on your operating budget funding? Like how much comes from the state versus private versus other municipalities?
Private, state funding is like less than 5%. No federal funding.
So state funding is less than 5%, private funding is,
Oh, privates,
It's
so
everything.
through programs and services that we do, it's like 40, 50%, and private funding's like 40%, 45%, something like that.
okay. And so other municipalities, I mean, you're the Arts Council of Moore County. Are there,
Right.
do they contribute to your operating?
No,
So every time that there's something that happens to this building and we contribute, we're the only municipality that's
Yes.
actually partaking, okay.
but because of our relationship and our stewardship of the building, we have put a lot into that building too.
Yeah.
So it's not a
Oh.
one-way type of thing.
And
I didn't mean you were saying that.
No, that's
It's just-
okay. We appreciate that you're in Southern Pines. I think that the arts and humanities is a big part of what makes Southern Pines different than the rest of the county.
And benefits our taxpayers because it's a part of our culture. I think that's a really important component.
Okay. Are there specific things that you all would like to know outside of everything we've discussed between now and drafting? a
We need
lease agreement?
guidance as far as what we think, right? Or do you want to table it and get input from the other two members of council?
I think we can craft something based off of a number of points I have heard and bring it back as exactly what it'll be, a draft. And that might be
Okay,
in exactly this sort of setting, at which point the two other members of council will be here also, and we can hopefully knock out any rough edges and finalize a document for a future council consideration and adoption
okay.
at a business meeting.
As far as incentive for benefactors, is there a difference between a 20 and 30-year lease, in your opinion, as far as selling the?
Longer the better. We had a focus group meeting of potential donors and asked them, what would you be your biggest questions about donating to this project? And
Right.
one was, what is your status of being in the Campbell House? And
Right.
right now, we have a month-to-month lease.
Right, you do.
And
yeah.
the longest lease we would get, we think, would have been 5 years at that time. And then, so they said the longer the lease, the better.
It was so strong, Councilman Peterson, to where people with long-term ties in the Spokane group to the Arts Council
Right,
did not want to contribute. I
Right.
mean, it was a serious obstacle that we had.
right. I understand that. I would be tentative myself. So my instinct is to make it a 30-year lease. And I do like the deductible, but also graduated increase as far as the amount. I would go 500 to 750 to 1,000. And I would make that a deductible on any repair, which I think already the Arts Council is an incredible steward of the property. But I think that would stop any games in the future. I'm just trying to think logically, 12 years down the road, none of us are here representing the town, and how do we make that a clean, how do we make for some clean rules of the game?
Absolutely.
And I like the deductible. I think it's a pretty huge jump to go from, I understand that 100 is atrociously low. I think it's a pretty huge jump to all of a sudden say, okay, go raise $3 million plus let's do $1,000 on any repair. So I would go 500, and then in a number of years, and it can be 5 or 10, go 750, and then go 1,000. And I would do a 30-year lease because I think that gives them the stronghold that they need as far as fundraising. I think they're trying to do something that's going to benefit our community. And I would definitely do first right of refusal to them if the town decides to eliminate the asset. I'm assuming that we're talking about not the land, not all the land around the Campbell House, just the footprint of the Campbell House and the footprint of the addition if and when it's completed.
Footprint of the Campbell House and addition and kind of the immediately
immediate- yeah, okay.
surrounding gardens that Mr. Bradley is
we're
working on. And
talking-
that's going to be another huge benefit, that they're making the investment on sort of returning those to their historic state, and then the ongoing maintenance of those. That will save our crews some time to
Okay,
be able to dedicate to other parks and areas around town, so.
that makes sense.
You, can you clarify on the rec center? It says specifically plumbing over 1,000.
Plumbing?
What is the agreement on general repairs with the Boys and Girls Club?
On general repairs,
If their HVAC goes out, or if,
I would have to honestly go back and take a look
so right now
at
we just know
that.
about plumbing. Will you do that? Because I feel like setting,
I know
a
we have
level
spent
playing
significant
field
money
makes
over
sense.
there on particularly HVAC systems. And then, of course, there's an ongoing plumbing issue that we're hoping to get resolved in very short order, because the town inherited, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jessica, do you recall offhand on that?
Not well enough to.
Yeah, we'll get that.
It's very nuanced.
Right, and if there are problems with that contract, I don't feel comfortable basing this contract that we're about to do on.
Yeah,
that
I'm
are-
not going to suggest there's problems with that contract. It's a very unique situation we
Yes.
have there. But I would also proffer that this relationship and setup is different in many
very
ways
different.
from that one
It's
also.
Very different, right, I agree. So I think that is not a point that concerns me.
well, I think it concerns me. I'm not sure why we're repeating ourselves. Chris, do you have information about how many users are actually taking advantage of the Arts Council events, programs? Do you have it broken down by town? Do you
A
get that?
town.
Even without being broken down by town, do you have statistics on who's using it? How many people are using it?
Oh, you probably have a better idea.
I don't remember. I use it for grants. It's thousands of people a year.
Yeah.
And then the grounds, I've worked with Parks and Recreation to give me numbers on that.
Yeah.
But it's many thousands of people.
Yeah, and if you keep in mind, we're the Arts Council of Moore County, we count all the
Yeah.
schools, programs that we do, and all the students that we benefit that in that number, but it's 40, 50,000 easily.
At that site specifically. And one
Oh,
thing.
the site specifically.
Yeah, one thing I'll point out, we've mentioned before, the decorative ceiling that we're going to be doing in the gallery is going to be on par with the frescoes in Western North Carolina. And so artists that have a tie to Southern Pines, very famous international realist painters, are going to be doing panels in the ceiling, and it will tell the story of Paint Hill. And our choice of that is it's emblematic of what we are as a people, the flora and fauna and folklore of Paint Hill. And so the draw of that will be enormous. I think one of the frescoes alone draws something like 50,000 people a year to see just that one fresco. And so that precipitates out to the businesses and to the benefit of everyone.
And what we're trying to do is tie the use of the Campbell House with where it came from, which was the Boyd Estate, and then you tie Paint Hill and Weymouth Woods to that whole area, so you get a better experience of what Southern Pines is and where it came from. So it's going to be Southern Pines centered, what we do.
Okay. Yeah, I think if staff is comfortable coming up with just a draft and bringing it back to the council, we will review this again at next month's work
May I ask
session.
2 questions?
Sure.
For the Arts Council, is there a deadline on when you need this new lease executed?
There really isn't, but it'd be nice by July 1st. Is that too early?
Probably not.
Because we just want to get back to the donors that have already contributed and continue with the meetings we have, just say, here's where we are and how we've addressed that.
Understand. Second question, Mayor, is for you and Councilmember Gray. Councilmember Peterson laid out 4 pieces of her understanding of what we were headed toward. Do y'all agree with those? Are those our drafting instructions?
I was more comfortable with 20 years and $1,000 being the starting point for a deductible. I am okay with the deductible part of that, as Councilwoman Peterson explained. What was the 4th piece?
first right of refusal, 30-year lease,
I'm-
rising deductible.
I think we
and a
talk about first
deductible
right of
for-
refusal when we're talking about construction.
Okay.
I don't think it makes sense to add that right now.
In terms of my feelings, I really respect the fact that they're fundraising right now. So I'm not sure about the $1,000 right now. I kind of liked what Manager Parsons was talking about in terms of incrementing that amount over a period of time. 20, 30-year lease, I'm not sure which one I would necessarily prefer at this point, but everything else, yeah, I'm in favor of the
I have
deduction.
I have a suggestion. How's everybody feel about a 25-year lease?
I think that's probably fine.
Yeah.
Just pencil in 25 for now.
The Arts Council, are you planning to borrow any money for the construction?
Only if we need it. At the end of the year, we hope to have $1 million in construction funds raised. And we're working with First Bank on a bridge loan if we need it to help get the contractor started. You know, that's,
But you're not looking at any long-term loan like 30
no,
years or
we
20
want this to be
years?
debt-free as soon as we open the doors.
Okay,
That's,
got it.
we won't stop fundraising until we have met our goal.
Any loan we get would be secured by monies that we have in
Yeah.
an account of some sort. So it
Just
wouldn't be,
checking.
yes, we would
Yeah.
have funds to pay that if we had to.
How are you guys about the deductible with the graduated increase over time?
I think that's fair. It's fair to the town and understandable on our end.
Okay,
Just to let you know how it works now, if something breaks, we call the town
right,
to see if they have somebody on staff that can fix it, which is a lot cheaper than calling an
absolutely.
HVAC system to come look at
Right,
it. So we
right.
always go through the town first. I was trained by David White. First time I went on my own, he said, no, don't ever do that again.
I think that's probably a good thing to include in the contract, that the first call needs to be to the town. I agree with that.
That's okay.
And
That's the way
then,
I've been doing it, but I can change.
right, no, I think that's great. I think that's a responsible and efficient way to handle the funding.
Sorry.
All right, I think staff has enough information to move forward.
Did you all nod yes to 25 years, or are we at
Yeah, I think we did, yeah.
25? Okay. Thank you.
Chris, thank you guys for coming in.
Thank you
Very
so
much.
Thank y'all so very
What you're
much.
doing in $900,000 is amazing.
You're happy.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
so exciting.
We can't wait to break ground.
We are going to be one.
And we
lucky
invite y'all
community.
there, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
With the shovel and everything?
I would hope so.
Okay.
Yes.
I've never done that.
I'll bring my own shovel, buddy. Exciting.
Okay, Manager Parsons, moving forward on the update for fiscal year 26 budget.
Yeah, and you had a detailed memo in your packet regarding this, but essentially, the items that came out of the retreat, and then, of course, just a couple of pieces of information that came in between the retreat and today, have adjusted that budget a little bit. Just very quickly relative to that, we got April sales tax receipts, so that added a little bit when we refigured the 3-year rolling average. We changed all of the salary line items from the initial approach of 3% COLA, 3% merit pool to the 2.5% COLA, 4% merit pool that
We
council
got a
discussed.
birdie over.
What's that?
We got a birdie for.
Yes.
I know,
yes.
that's exciting to
So
see.
That change was made.
Anna?
And of course, that's one of those changes that also has a 25% impact based upon the reserve. We, as I had discussed at the retreat, we were able to finalize some major medical contracts that dropped the initially budgeted 15% increase to 12%, in addition to being able to offer a hybrid scenario. Previously, employees only had available to them a PPO option. We now will be rolling out a high deductible health plan with a health savings account option in addition to PPO, and bring that 15% down to 12. So that had a little bit of a monetary impact. Tess had to go back in and make a small adjustment on these Sabita financing. So that had a small adjustment with the 25%. And then, let's see, county valuation did come in, and it was the exact same figure that we utilized coming into the retreat. So there were no adjustments made based upon the tax base that the county tax office provided to us. You'll recall that when discussing the potential for a portable restroom, portable but permanent, not permanent, but I don't want anybody to think Porta John, but the restrooms at Martin Park, council had asked about, at the very least, doing a hand washing station. Staff was actually able to find one of those in stock and available for a mere $3,200. So that has been either ordered or obtained. I'm not sure which as of today, and will be installed in short order. And then the downtown parking lot was the other item that we had some significant discussion around. And for clarity of anybody listening in or watching in that wasn't familiar with it from the retreat, what we're talking about is the little asphalted area inside the downtown park when you come off of New York Avenue. Assistant Manager Cameron, Planner Grieve, I know were out there one morning when I came by, taking a look at the area. They have involved Engineer Mickle and our Assistant Public Works Director, Corey Albers, and they are in the process of coming up with maybe 3 options the council can take a look at, because we talked about everything from grassing the entire area in to expanding the parking a little bit to maybe shrinking it down and doing some hybrids of that. So the intent is to bring back to the council, very similar to what we did along Southwest Broad Street, where you saw some options of grass, brick grass hybrids, but bring back some conceptual plans for the council to choose from amongst and give us some direction. Again, not to impact the May budget hearing, unless you say this evening that you've thought about it and you decide you'd like to set some money aside for that, and you can just let us know where you land with the design. But otherwise, that may be something that comes back to you in the May work session hearing, and if we need to make a budgetary adjustment prior to the final hearing in June and adoption, we can do so at that time.
Would the proposals include an estimate in regard to what, yeah?
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
do a similar
Yes.
estimate. And to remind you, the original number that involved basically paving back in sort of a version of what's there was $125,000. Our estimate at this point, and I say this with the one caveat that there was some discussion around bollards and different things that may impact this statement, but our discussion at this point is that is probably the most expensive likely project, because grass is going to be cheaper than asphalt. However, it's going to involve extending the irrigation project that we're doing. So it's probably going to be $125,000 or less. Again, with the caveat that depending on whether there's a drive in what we do relative to gating it or bollarding it or something might change that a little bit. But the 125 should accomplish whatever direction the council decides they'd like to take out there. And again, that's 125 we have not budgeted to this point, but there's certainly available fund balance to be able to do that once a determination is made. So after all of those changes I just ran through, the bottom line available fund balance above the 25% at this point stands at about $804,000. So again, if you add 125 back in, you've got some money to work with there. That can be money toward Graves' part of grant when it gets approved or whatever. But really in a pretty good spot relative to the budget at this stage. With that, I would simply ask whether there has been any other thoughts, consideration, additions since the retreat. Otherwise, I'd like to leave today with at least the initial draft, because Beth has got to put the public notice out that it will become available at the library and the administration office, and that we'll be holding a budget hearing in May. And again, we can always change it right up to adoption in June. Just looking for a standard from which to work today, working toward the first hearing in May. So.
I've got a couple things, but I'll
Go
let you
ahead.
all, no, I'll let you all speak first.
My question is the impact on the employee who chooses the high deductible health plan with the HSA. I know that saves the town money. Does that make the employee more money if they go with that
So-
option?
So the way we have set that up, because the HDHP is a little bit less expensive product for the town to purchase, number one, the PPO option will move from a 5% to a 10% employee participation figure.
Okay,
But also because of the difference between the two, the town will actually fund the first, I hesitate to say first. Over the course of 12 months, the town will fund $2,000 into the HSA to help
say,
to help toward the $4,000 deductible on the HDHP. The other advantage that program brings to a number of our employees is those that opt for either employee spouse, employee partner, employee family coverage, cover 100% of the difference between what the town covers for the employee and then the rest of that policy. So because the HDHP is a less expensive policy, someone opting to cover their family with that actually will be having less deducted from their check for the health coverage each month. One of the things we heard from a number of employees, because we do carry a good PPO policy, it's not the cheapest PPO policy. So for those that were trying to cover children or families, it was a very expensive thing to opt for. So the HDHP does provide for a product available to them that isn't quite as expensive as the PPO.
so if they do the HSA and the higher, basically deductible, they end up with $2,000 that the town has contributed into their HSA, and that would be tax-free monies that moved into their HSA, right?
That travels with them.
It travels with
Currently,
them, right.
employees have the ability to opt into an FSA, but the deal with an FSA is you have to spend it every year.
Right.
With the exception of a $500 carryover. The HSA is, if you don't spend anything in it, it carries over to the following
have
year
to-
and the following year
Right.
and leaves with you if
You don't have to use it or lose it,
exactly.
which is the problem with the FSA. All right, okay, great, super. That sounds like a fair way to deal with
We're
that.
hoping there's we're hoping it turns out to be a product the employees really appreciate and take advantage of.
Yeah,
So.
I know I would.
And ultimately, even with the benefit of the $2,000 in, it saves the town some money if enough people opt into that, to the second option.
If everybody opted into it in year one, it would not necessarily save a bunch of money in any way, shape, or form. What
Okay.
it does do is if everybody decided that was the direction to go,
Which,
future years
they
relative to
won't.
renewals and such, because you're starting at a lower base with the HDHP than you were the PPO, you
Right.
kind of reset the market back to what we might have been paying for the PPO 10 years ago.
so it gives
not a long-term
Bruce a
benefit.
negotiating, yeah, it gives Bruce a negotiating tool. Okay, I understand, thank you.
Mayor? Oh, Deborah?
From Councilman Goodman, he wanted to ask staff if they could review the feasibility of managing the municipal waste and yard waste as an enterprise fund. I think he had concerns that as the money is collected and then filters back into the general fund, we really have no way of telling if what we're charging our residents is accurate. And I don't think he's asking for it to change anytime soon. I think he just wants to know if it's feasible and how it would work.
It's absolutely feasible. We've had some very initial discussions about it. I would ask we try not to tackle that in the next
No,
60
yeah.
days, but
No, I was thinking
for
fiscal
fiscal
year
year 27, I mean, what that would ultimately look like is going to be an awful lot like the spreadsheets that Jessica's already put together, because we'll have to come up with a formula for the indirect costs and such, very similar to what we do between the water and sewer and the general fund. But it is certainly not out of the realm of possibility that we could turn solid waste into an enterprise fund.
All right, I think that was his only request, is just to look into how it would work. And then I had a question on sales tax. What are the numbers you're using for the 3-year rolling average? Because I think we're not using this past year. We're using 3 years, not including 24, 25.
I will verify that with Tess, but I know when we went back and calculated it last year, what we did was we used the 3 years for Initially, because when we first put the revenue projections together, we used the 3 years that included the current year for the July
Like 9
through
months.
December type of thing.
Okay, 6 months of it.
And then, and then we adjust. Now, I think she's gone beyond 6 months at this point because I know she
Like
made
9
an
months.
adjustment based upon the April receipts that came in right after the retreat. So it's 3 years back, including current year for those months that we have, and then we use the 3 previous years for the months we have not gotten out through yet.
Okay. So I didn't go through all of them, but I ran a couple of the line items. And it ends up being about $400,000 difference if we use 22, 23 actual, 23, 24 actual, and expected 24, 25. So if you'll just ask Tess which ones
Okay.
we're using.
Yeah, I
Because
don't think we used any expected figures in doing that.
I think
but-
even if you use the budget, it's gonna be more because when I run the numbers with 21 through 24 actual, what I'm getting is our budget for next year. Just ask, if you'll
Okay.
ask her, that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay, I wanna make sure that we had a policy on how to do it and make sure we're doing
Yeah.
it correctly. And I think that was all I had.
Okay.
Mac, is there something that you wish you were saying? Okay, okay, thank you. The body language.
All right, is there anything else you need from us on the budget? Does this count as the first public hearing?
No. First public hearing will be at the business meeting in May. That's why I said if I can come out of this with a sense that we're not making changes before that, because we've got all the presentation to put together and everything.
Do you want us to go ahead and set aside the 125 for downtown parking? Or is that something that you just want to wait and,
Honestly, if you are in agreement that you're going to do something there, and again, I'm going to recommend, if you've not been over there,
Something
there's
has to
trip
happen.
hazards. It's got to come out, and it's just a question of what we kind of put back in. But yeah, if you're comfortable that you'll make a decision to go with one of the 3 conceptual plans or some hybrid thereof after they're drawn up, happy to make that transfer ahead of and just include it in the budget. That's a very easy change in the budget, and that way we can include it in the presentation in May.
That would be the least expensive of the 3 options that we would be
No,
presenting.
125 should cover any of the
Anything,
options,
okay,
is what I'm being
okay.
told, yes.
All right,
And if it turns out when you look at the concept plan, you want to do more with it, we can talk about adding a little bit more to the fund or something,
Okay.
so.
okay.
you comfortable with that?
I'm very comfortable with that. That makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you, manager. Library discussion. So we got a specific request from one of our citizens, which I want to make it very clear that tonight we are not talking about specifics, but rather the general how the overdue or fee process works. I know that Friends of the Library, we have like a forgiveness program now that didn't exist in the past. And you've been kind enough to share some of the long-standing, outstanding fees. That's a lot of words. And I think it's probably makes sense that, I think we all want citizens to be using the library as an asset. So if you'll just give us an idea of how you, I don't know, what's going on and if you have ideas, that'd be great.
Can do.
Thank you.
If you have any questions while I'm talking, please interrupt me and ask. But thank you for having me. I'm very happy to talk about this. Some of these fees are very long outstanding. So just as a summary, what we're talking about with this is not fines. So we did do away with fines a number of years ago, and those were all erased. All past fines were also erased at that time. So these are not fines for books that were overdue. These are fees for lost items that people have not returned to the library or damaged items that were returned but never paid for. For damaged items, typically what we do is if it's something that we can repair in-house, we won't charge for it. And our staff, we have a couple staff who have attended State Library and Archives workshops over the years, and they are trained to do basic book repairs. There are things, though, that we can't fix. And so when that comes in, the patron is then charged the cost of the material, and they're also charged a $5 processing fee. And that processing fee goes to replacing the time replacing the item in the ordering, but also the barcodes, RFID tags, the wrapping of the books, all the labeling, all of that costs money. So, and those processing fees, as far as I know, have never been updated. But our process currently is that when an item comes for what we would term lost items, when an item comes overdue, the patron gets a notification of their preference, either an email or a text message. We don't do written notifications right away because mail is expensive, but as soon as it comes overdue. About 2 weeks later, they get another notification that way, if it still hasn't been returned. And then 2 weeks after that, they do get a formal letter in the mail to their address on record that says these items are overdue. If they don't return them, then it's approximately 90 days from the overdue date that they get turned over, 60 to 90, I'd have to look that up. Anyway, they get turned over to what we term, it's kind of like a collections agency. It doesn't get reported on a credit report, anything like that. And the patron, and they help us track this person down because maybe someone moved, their email changed, their phone number changed, we're not sure. And so they will help track the person down. Of course, it's for a fee. And if the materials are returned, they do charge us for that service. And then hopefully the item's returned. If it's not returned, eventually it goes into a long overdue status, and it's charged to the patron. At a certain point, like people have been waiting on it, we've already put in a replacement request, especially for popular materials where there's holds. So there is, I guess to say that we don't always recoup the cost of those types of things. Outstanding currently for the library, what was the number? Is about $57,249 in lost or damaged materials that have never been paid. Now, this dates back to what I can see on our records of 1995, when the library opened 30 years ago and went to the ILS system that we have now. I think we probably could look at getting rid of some of that debt owed to us, as I think a large majority of the people are not in Southern Pines anymore for whatever reason. I would hesitate to do anything in years too close to where we are now, simply because what we've seen with other things like fine-free weeks, that type of benefit to people, we're trying to help people, but it turns out that people will wait and not return their materials until it's dismissed. And so we don't want to get into that kind of situation.
What would you call it too close?
I would say we need at least 5 years for something like that. We ran some very specific numbers. So the 57,000 was just the bulk, like all of it. So I broke it out by fiscal year. And on average, we are seeing, since 2010-11, we are seeing between $2,000 and $3,000 a year in those unpaid costs.
Okay.
Prior to that, there's a big bulk in 2009-10. Something happened in our system because there's $20,000 that year. But then prior to that, there's like 1 or 2 transactions each year. So I think something happened in that year with a system change, which kind of consolidated everything. But yes. My recommendation for kind of looking at this a little more closely would be for it to go to our library advisory board and for them to take a look at it. Their next meeting is June 9th. And so they could take a look at it, maybe make some recommendations to y'all on what they think might be a good way to handle this.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think they should make the recommendation. What I'd like is maybe 2 different things. One, which is we just automatically delete things past, like at a certain time. Like if it's 20 or 30 years, or we just pick a date that it does automatically happen. And then another one, maybe a combination of a number of years and a dollar amount that are forgiven by request. So instead of you going in the system and just deleting them, if a patron comes to you and says, I really need access to library resources, want to check out, and then you have administrative authority, or the staff does, to say, well, this is our, what we were allowed to do. Does that,
I think that seems fair.
okay.
And that could go, we do have a policy in our payment for lost and damaged items policy. So that could easily go in there, which kind of instructs staff on being able to do that type of thing.
How much do you generally collect in terms of something that's damaged? Go back to-
It is the cost of the item. So each of our items are cataloged individually and in the library system. And so when something is damaged or not returned, the patron is charged for whatever the cost it was for us to purchase it.
What's the average?
It really depends. So we have I would answer, but I really don't have, we have things that cost $3 and then we have things that cost $150.
Gotcha.
So it really would depend on what the item is. There are things, our more expensive things tended to be like audiobooks, CD audiobooks, with especially the ones that have 30 discs in them. But a lot of those, the companies allowed us to order individual discs from them, and so we were just paying for that individual disc. We tried to work with people as much as we could. Just, sometimes things are just more expensive.
So I would be interested in, it sounds like the fee for service for the collectibles have never been revisited for many, many years. I'd be interested in what an actual cost is on the
Processing fee?
on the barcode and the rebinding and the, right now you're at $5. I'd be interested in whether or not that should maybe be raised. I'm also interested in if I had a book on tape that I took out, and I really prove I'm old to call it a book on tape. If I had a book on disc that I took out in 2000, and we then forgive everything up to 2020, when I come in to check out something new now, do I have a clean slate? Or does it still run that I owe you $48.72 for the book on tape that I never returned?
So if we would do a system-wide process to dismiss anything prior to a certain date,
Yeah,
then it would take all, it would remove it.
okay,
And so we would not, our records are through the financial part of the system.
right.
So we would not have a record anymore because the item is already gone. So we don't
So
have
it's-
the item. We would it's only through that financial piece.
It would be amnesty for me if I came in that case. Okay.
And I think, so we talked about, you mentioned 5 years, and then
Right.
I feel like longer, if it's going to be a complete wipe, it needs to be more than 5 years. But again, it's up to the library advisory to make a recommendation. But my thought was, if it's going to be a clean slate wipe, it's like 20 years ago.
I like the 5-year. I think there are plenty of people with books sitting at home and items sitting at home that they could return, and I would like to encourage them to do that. And Mac has reached for a microphone, which is a
Yes, I
sign.
have. I'd like your permission to look up the statute of limitations on a debt, and let's
Right.
see if that informs this discussion at all.
That'd be great. That'd be great, yeah.
For some reason, I'm thinking 7, but you're the lawyer, Max, so you would know.
Statutes of limitations are all across the board
All
for
over the
different
place,
numbers and
right.
different types of
Yeah.
debts.
Is that what I'm thinking? Yeah.
Will you provide that to the library advisory board? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And the other thing I want to say is, having gone through almost, well, everybody in town's financial records, you are amazing. I have never found, I mean, yours are the most complicated from 8,000 different directions because you're ordering all sorts of things from all different directions. Your records are clear. You are spot on to the penny. And I thank you for that. You are so responsible and so efficient and effective in your leadership. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for saying so. That's very kind. I would say that is not to my credit. That is to my staff's credit. They do a wonderful job.
Leadership determines how well things run. So thanks.
All right, do you have any more input?
It's just,
Do you-
I think you're very fair. I'm just listening to some of the things that you decide, everything from the $5 to, no more fines and just, I think it's just, it's, yeah, kind of ditto to what Councilwoman Peterson just said, yeah.
Well, thank you
You're
so
doing a great
much.
job, thank you.
It's a great place to work, and, we really want the community to use the library, so
Yeah,
anything we
absolutely.
can do to get that to happen.
Good. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, thanks for having me.
Yes. Let us know if you need anything else from us. Otherwise, we look forward to hearing what library advisory says.
Will this automatically be put back on after the library advisory committee meet? Is that?
We can either put it back on an agenda or just give you an update on what they determine and decide on, and
Okay.
and if you're happy with it, great, and if not, we'll be back here, I guess, so.
Sounds good. Okay, thanks.
Okay, last thing is our roundtable. Ms. Peterson?
I have nothing. I've just gotten off a plane and home at 10 o'clock last night, so I'm wrapping my head back around Southern Pines, so.
Okay, that's good. I was up at midnight at
There
a
you go.
book release party last night. Why, I don't know. Because I live downtown. That's what you do. Okay, I don't have anything. And I actually talked to both Brandon and Bill. I don't think they have anything. Do you have anything?
I don't think I have anything. I didn't get off the plane either, but I don't have anything, no.
I think that speaks to the staff that we don't have anything for roundtable right now. So thank you guys all for your hard work.
Thank you.
Oh, no, I do.
All right,
I do,
never mind.
I do.
Just kidding. I take back.
I had to think. Moving slow, brains moving slow. Huge kudos to our police department, to our planning department. In a town like Southern Pines, I think it's normal for people to feel overlooked, not seen. But a neighbor, she's not a close neighbor to me, but a couple of blocks away, older lady locked herself out. And the police department were very hesitant about coming there and climbing through her window because they were like, well, we'd have to break the window. She said, the window's already broken. And they climbed in, and she will never, ever, ever forget that the Southern Pines Police Department cared enough about her to climb in her window and let her in. So kudos. So she's a resident of West Southern Pines, and so I just think
Thank you. That's good to hear.
it's very good to hear, yeah. And planning department, I can.
Say, I didn't climb through any windows.
But he would have.
He would have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, actually, it was the same neighbor that I was able to speak to our planning director in regard to some concerns that she had. But just to be able to let the residents know that, hey, you're in a town where people care, and folks are not overlooked, and so it was great. Thank you.
Yeah, I was concerned about a property line issue. Yeah. Happy to help.
I will, just to play off that a little bit, I'll take the opportunity to also recognize BJ was good enough to come out and fly a drone for the police department in the midst of a pretty significant issue a couple weeks ago. And our public safety pilot was in training out of town that day, so it was good they were able to call upon him, and we deputized him for a day, so.
Listen, never have the words, it was my pleasure, been more true. That was a cool call to get. So, thank you for the opportunity.
Good. All good things. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all very much. See you in a couple weeks.